Hello and welcome to LFC Focus. It is pre-match build-up showtime with Liverpool taking on Arsenal yet again. This time we'll be playing them at Anfield as we did on Monday night, although it will be in the Carabao Cup fourth round instead of being a Premier League game. So of course we can expect a lot of rotation from Liverpool. I think we may see some from Arsenal as well. I'll come on to them a bit later on in the video and how exactly I think they're going to approach the game. But I think what's most interesting about this one is that it's certainly an exciting prospect. It's a match to look forward to. There always seems to be something about these League Cup ties that we can pick out that makes them a little bit more exciting, whether it's the opposition we're playing, whether it's perhaps, later on in the competition, the excitement of getting closer and closer to a possible final and possible silverware, or sometimes it's just the excitement of seeing some fringe players that don't pull on the Liverpool shirt as often as maybe some of us would like to. And I think that's certainly going to be the case in this game against Arsenal. And also, given how things panned out against Arsenal in the League Cup fourth round last year, I think if we're in for anything like that this time, then we are, of course, in for an absolute treat. That game ending 5-5, a real example of the League Cup at its best, to be honest, because at the end of the day, we don't go into these games thinking it's win or die. It's not like the Premier League matches or the European matches where you're absolutely desperate for Liverpool to get the result over the line. And sometimes it is actually more about the performance than the result. You'd almost rather see the youngsters play well and the fringe players, stake a claim for future places in the Liverpool side and then maybe narrowly lose to another good Premier League side than you would be to see us play poorly, make a lot of errors, but maybe scrape through 4-3 or 5-4 or something ridiculous against a lower league side. What you really just want to see is a good, entertaining performance from Liverpool, and the result at the end, obviously, you'd want us to go through. And of course, given how things panned out against Arsenal last year, it was great to see us go through on penalties. But I was at that game, and even when it was 5-4 going into stoppage time, part of me also thought, this game's not over. Liverpool can still get an equaliser. But part of me also thought, I know we're losing, and we're likely to go out of the cup at this stage, but I've enjoyed myself. It's been great to see those players. They haven't really done themselves, any damage with the way they've played. And some players have actually played themselves almost into contention for future games for Liverpool. So that's what I'm really looking forward to, is just seeing those lads getting out, as they did against Lincoln as well, and hopefully putting in a very, very entertaining performance. So as for who's actually going to play, we had a little bit of team news from Pep Lijnders, who once again took his press conference for this game. Of course, we'll expect Jurgen Klopp to be in the dugout as he was against Lincoln City in the previous round. But it seems Jurgen Klopp has slightly higher priorities than his media duties for this tournament. And of course, Pep Lijnders has performed absolutely admirably in the press conferences in the past, and today was no different. But he did say that there'll be no Jordan Henderson, Joel Matip or Kostas Tsimikas. Matip, not really a surprise. Henderson, a little bit irritating that he's still not available. Of course, there was talk of him facing a fitness test for the game against Arsenal on Monday night. So it's a little bit concerning that he still isn't available yet for Liverpool. And hopefully he'll be there for the Aston Villa game. But again, they're talking about seeing on Friday, and then maybe he takes a late fitness test over the weekend or something like that to see if he's available. But he's certainly not available for this game. Tsimikas is, from the perspective of this match, probably the biggest blowout of all of them, because he was one player who you thought was probably nailed on to start this match. Unfortunately, he's not going to be available at left back for Liverpool, so that does present a little bit of a conundrum as to who's going to start in that left back berth, and I'll come on to that in a moment. Other players that Pep Lijnders mentioned, he talked up a lot of the fringe players you'd expect to start in this game. Talked about how pleased they were with Xherdan Shaqiri's performance. Of course, he played a slightly more withdrawn role, almost as part of a midfield three against Lincoln City, and it was good to see that versatility from him, because of course, if the only position he wants to play is right wing, and that's the position he's mainly fulfilled for Liverpool so far in his career, then he's going to struggle to get games, because Mo Salah's absolutely fantastic, and Harvey Elliott's breathing down his neck as well. So if he can reinvent himself as a progressive midfield player, absolutely brilliant. And Pep Lijnders certainly seemed pleased with what he'd shown so far this season, both in training and of course on the pitch, with that fantastic free kick and very solid performance against Lincoln. He also talked about Curtis Jones, who's obviously been an absolute revelation for Liverpool over the last 12 months or so. He has continued his meteoric rise. Playing against Lincoln, he just looks streets ahead of those players as well. And Minamino, of course, who we can also expect to play some sort of role in this game and is really, really kicking on in his Liverpool career at the moment. He was also asked about Billy Kmet, Kometio, who of course did not feature in the game against Lincoln City, but does seem to be very, very highly rated by the backroom staff after he burst on the scene during pre-season and played a couple of friendlies, putting some absolutely sublime, well, not sublime, but for someone of his age who's only just flown in, to put in the kind of performances that he did is absolutely incredible for a lad who's only 17 years old and has just been thrust into the first team setup. But of course he didn't play in the game against Lincoln City. Instead, Rhys Williams got the nod. Linders was a little bit coy on whether or not he would be taking any part in this game. I think the wording was "we'll see" or "let's see," which is something that Jurgen Klopp likes to say as well. You often think when they say that it means that something's going to happen. It's not just going to be that Billy Kometio won't be involved at all. If they've said "let's see," then it probably means that he's definitely in the thinking, and unless he has any issues with injuries or fitness or anything like that, then we'll probably see something of Billy Kometio either from the starting 11 or on the bench in the game against Arsenal. So as for how I think we're actually going to line up, I think it is going to be Adrian San Miguel in goal, of course keeping his place after he played against Lincoln in the previous round. You can talk as much as you want in the comments down below. We've sort of done the Adrian discourse to death now about whether or not we think he's good enough for Liverpool, whether he's good enough to be a backup keeper in the Cups, whether he's good enough to actually come in and fill in for Adrian in big games and stuff like that. Under these circumstances, not hugely fussed. Like I said, it's more about the performance, and I'm more interested to see what Adrian can offer, because if Alisson does get injured, and of course he had that slight injury scare before the game against Arsenal, then Adrian needs minutes. We need to know that he's still playing up to the expected standard for Liverpool, so we want to see him in this game, and he almost definitely will be starting between the sticks barring any late injuries, in which case we probably see Kevin Kelleher. Personally, I thought we were going to see Kevin Kelleher in the game against Lincoln City, but it seems that Klopp has settled on Adrian, presumably, like I said, to give Adrian that little bit more experience should he have to be thrust into the first team setup in a more serious way later on in the season. But Adrian, I think, will be the goalkeeper. The centre-half pairing is the really, really difficult one. I think, given how we set up against Lincoln, I certainly wouldn't be surprised if Jurgen Klopp goes for a similar situation of having a young centre-half who's come through the academy and then a more experienced head alongside them. We've seen in the Cups in the past where we've gone for two young centre-halves, maybe thinking about players like Sepp van den Berg, Nat Phillips, and also more recently Rhys Williams obviously coming into the setup, and Billy Kometio being contenders for those kind of roles. But it's sometimes worked and it sometimes hasn't, and especially against a team like Arsenal, you actually do run the risk of setting those players' development back by making them have difficult games, by putting them under serious pressure. And of course, if they do want to break onto the first team scene in any capacity for Liverpool, then the players they're going to be playing alongside are senior centre-halves. They're going to be with Virgil van Dijk, with Joe Gomez, with Joel Matip, those kind of lads. So they've got to try and build up partnerships with those kind of players. So with that in mind, I think we're going to carry on with this system, as I said, like we used against Lincoln, of having a youngster and then a more experienced head. And I think we'll probably keep Rhys Williams in the setup. Given that Pep Linders was coy on Billy Kometio, I think it's unlikely that we'll actually see him from the start. Normally, in these kind of situations, especially a League Cup game, we're a bit more liberal with announcing who is and isn't going to play any kind of part before the game. You probably would have heard that Billy Kometio would be starting, also because, you know, the manager basically wants to get that information out there as quickly as possible for Kometio's sake as much as for the fans' sake as well. So given that we haven't had anything concrete, I think Williams will probably start, and then alongside him, I'm going to go with Fabinho, simply because looking ahead to that Villa game at the weekend, I think Joe Gomez and Virgil van Dijk are almost nailed on to start that match as a centre-half pairing. And as a result, you don't really want to start either of them in this game. I know we used Van Dijk and Fabinho against Lincoln City, but given that they've now been used in that game, I think it would be a little bit overboards, if that's the right saying, to throw them in again, given how packed the schedule is now. They can occasionally play a midweek game as well as the weekend matches as well, and of course they're going to have to find that rhythm if they're going to be able to contend with the Champions League schedule, which is of course just round the corner after the upcoming international break. But given that you've got the international break as well, and most of the players are going to have to play 2 games during that, I think it makes more sense to actually play Fabinho at centre-half and rest Joe Gomez and Virgil van Dijk, because we've got more options in midfield and we don't have to play Fabinho at the weekend. We pretty much have to play Joe Gomez and Van Dijk, whereas Fabinho can drop out. We've got other players there. If Henderson comes back in, you could play a Henderson, Wijnaldum and Keita midfield. You could bring Milner in as well. You could bring in Curtis Jones. You've got more options there. Fabinho doesn't have to start against Villa, whereas I think that isn't the case for the other 2 senior centre-halves that are fit at the moment. So I think Fabinho will probably play play as the other centre-back in this game. I think at right-back, once again, Nico Williams will come back in that role. And then at left-back, I think it's probably going to be James Milner, and that's part of my reasoning as well, that I don't think we'll go with two youth players at centre-half, because if you have Milner, who's of course not an orthodox left-back, and then two youngsters at centre-half and a youngster at right-back as well, it's not a great back line to be putting together. So putting in a slightly more experienced and high-quality head in Fabinho should hopefully nullify any problems that might come up from the rest of the selection. And of course, with Tsimikas unavailable, I don't really want to be risking Andrew Robertson. I think we do want to be using him in the game against Aston Villa at the weekend, and of course after the international break he is going to have to play plenty of games, likewise with Trent Alexander-Arnold with those European matches as well. So I think Milner will have to fill in at left back. And then further up the pitch, I think the two deeper midfielders, and it's very interesting how we set up, whether we go for that kind of fluid 4-3-3/4-2-3-1 that worked so well against Lincoln. I think given it's going to be largely similar players in the starting 11, we will probably go for that because it seemed to work so well in the previous round. And that means I think we go with two midfielders that sit back a little bit more. And I think those are going to be Marco Grujic and Curtis Jones. Of course, there's been talk of Marco Grujic going away. I think him, Harry Wilson and Brewster are the three players that were touted in the Liverpool Echo today as potentially moving on between now and the end of the window. But in the meantime, Grujic played well against Lincoln City, and it was said in the Echo that if no reasonable bids arrive, then Jurgen Klopp is perfectly happy to start working Marco Grujic on a more regular basis into his thinking for the side. So I think it makes sense to start him in this game. And he, like I said, he put in a decent performance. He's a good defensive midfielder as well. I've seen people talking about maybe using Milner as a 6 in this match, were we to play a more conventional 4-3-3. Of course, now Milner's probably going to move to left back. That isn't the case. But Milner is a midfielder that personally I don't think suits that number 6 role at all, whereas it does suit Marco Grujic quite well. And I think he'll be quite happy to sit with Curtis Jones operating as more of an 8. Further ahead, but sort of linking between them and the attack, I think it is going to be Xherdan Shaqiri, given that he was bigged up by Pep Lijnders in the press conference today, and there does seem to be talk of Xherdan Shaqiri having a bit more of an elevated role this season after a slightly odd season last time out. I think fitness issues played their part, the fact that other players kind of usurped him and went above him in the pecking order. I think given the way he played against Lincoln, he's probably going to get another chance as well, and given that, you know, he needs to be taking these chances as well if he wants to play more football at Liverpool, and he will see himself as a first team player. He'll see himself as someone who should be playing in the Premier League, in the Champions League, and he's got to deliver in these kind of games if he wants to do that. So I think he'll play slightly ahead of that midfield too. And then the front three, I think, is going to be Diogo Jota. I think he comes in for a start after a very, very impressive cameo against Arsenal. I think given his fluidity, the way he can play out wide, he can come inside, he can drop deep as a 10, play as a number 9. He can also push out to either of the flanks, whether it's right or left, comfortable on both feet as well. He suits this rather fluid attack that we seem to be going with in the League Cup. So I think he starts in this game. The same goes for Minamino, someone who's capable of playing pretty much across the attack. I think he'll start as well. And then Divock Origi, despite there still being potential talk of him moving away, given there's more talk around Ryan Brewster at the moment, I think it's actually quite likely now that Divock Origi stays on for another season at least. And I think as a result, he will lead the line for this game. And I think that is a starting 11 that I'm actually very happy with. I think in the past, we've been hard pressed to try and put together a decent 11 for these cup competitions that doesn't include any of like the starting 11 from the league game the weekend before, or the starting 11 that we're expecting to play in the league game in the upcoming weekend. We've now got that, not only the depth, but I think the right players as well. You look at those players, Minamino, Jota, Origi, Shaqiri, Curtis Jones. They seem to work within the system that you're expecting us to implement. And I think that's the most important thing. We've seen in the past players being shoehorned into systems and positions that they just don't fit in cup matches. Looking back even just to the Shrewsbury Town game halfway through last season, the one away where we blew that 2-0 lead and it ended up being 2-2. And we could have even lost that game in the end. That was a rather odd setup we chose for that game, and it was a mixture of youth and experience, but not in a way that I think really worked. And looking at this team that I'm expecting us to set out for this match, I think I'm seeing the right balance of youth and experience. I'm seeing the right balance of players who are hungry and players who are going to be more concerned with, you know, game management and stuff like that. Players who are going to go to the ball, players who are going to sit off, technical players, you know, aggressive tackling players and stuff like that. Players who are good off the ball, players who are good on the ball, etc. etc, etc, etc. There's a very nice balance there. We saw it working incredibly well against Lincoln, and hopefully we'll see it work incredibly well against this Arsenal side as well. And it's going to be very, very interesting to see how Arsenal set up, because I don't think their squad has quite the same depth as Liverpool's has. I think certainly in key positions like midfield, they do not have the ability to rotate that Liverpool do at the moment. And I think one thing that could work in their favour is the fact that they, like Liverpool, have got a lot of very, very good youngsters. I think Liverpool and Arsenal are probably the two teams in the Premier League at the moment that have balanced putting faith in youth and giving them game time and managing their development very, very well, so they're not thrown into the side and then have to be taken out because they make too many errors or something like that. Arsenal have got a lot of players like Maitland-Niles, like Bukayo Saka, like Eddie Nketiah, who've been managed in an absolutely perfect way to the point where they can now play in these League Cup matches, and you're not looking at them and thinking, well, they're just kids and they're not going to be that good. You're looking at them in the same way that they'll be looking at someone like Curtis Jones and thinking, that kid's got incredible talent and he can take this game by the scruff of the neck and he can cause serious problems, not just to the Liverpool lineup that we're playing today. You know, these are Arsenal players that can play Premier League games, that have played Premier League games and that have done well in Premier League games as well. So if they do play youngsters, I don't think it's necessarily going to be an awful side. But I think elsewhere in terms of fringe players, you know, you look at Liverpool where we can bring in someone like Origi or Shaqiri or even Marco Grujic, those players who aren't necessarily youngsters but are lads who have been mainly sitting on the bench. I think that's where Liverpool have got a little bit of an edge. I think Arsenal's bench players and players that are outside of that match day 18 who aren't youth players but are just lads who are on the fringes don't have the same kind of quality that Liverpool have in those key departments. So that could very well make the difference. But of course, given how Arsenal got beaten on Monday night, and I don't want to impose the idea that managers approach things on such a game-by-game basis. I think Mikel Arteta will have pretty much decided how to approach this game before they went to Anfield on Monday night. He will have seen this as a double match package, really, certainly in terms of how he's going to manage players' fitness and who starts on what game and whatever. But given how things panned out at Anfield, his thinking may slightly change, and he might sort of look at the League Cup now as an opportunity for Arsenal to get silverware in the cabinet, given the Premier League is probably going to be slightly out of reach this season, given that the European campaign isn't necessarily a gimme because there's still a little bit of a work in progress. The way that the League Cup works with this slightly truncated format, with the semi-finals condensed down to only one game, it's a little bit easier to get to the final. It's always been kind of the easiest competition to win if you really go all guns blazing, and he might look at this tie against Liverpool and think, actually, what's best for Arsenal is to put out players like Alexandre Lacazette, like Nicola Pepe, like someone like El Neni and Xhaka as well, the two midfielders that started. They have, of course, got Ceballos, who only got about half an hour at Anfield. So I think that it's entirely possible that he throws, not the kitchen sink, but certainly more than you might expect at this game. And Liverpool have got to be aware of that. And I think what's really positive is I can look at our team that I'm expecting us to set out, and I don't think there's too many shortcomings there. I don't think that we might need to throw in Firmino, Mane or Salah. I think if Arsenal go for this, and if Arsenal play some of or even a lot of their first teamers, I still think the team that Liverpool I'm expecting to put out for this game have got the ability to get this one over the line. And of course, if we do win this game, we're through to the 5th round, we're through to the quarterfinals, we're only 3 games away from what could be the first silverware of the season. So it's something to be excited about. Like I said, it's going to be exciting to see how Liverpool play as well. Let me know how you think the game is going to go down in the comments below. Apart from that, that is all for today's video. So as always, thank you very much for watching. If you did enjoy the video, you know what to do. Hit the like button down there, that subscribe button there if you're new around here. Check out some of the other videos that have been out on the channel in the past. Don't forget to follow at LSU Focus TV on Twitter, and I'll be back again with another video very soon. Until then, bye for now.